Thank you for coming to our October community call. We have a lot of good news to share, and we're excited to hear a lot more feedback from our users. So just in case this is your first time, Webrecorder is a project that builds on user-driven web archiving, where the user is able to direct the archiving process through their browser. And it originally started as webrecorder.io in 2016, thanks to a Mellon grant. And like every grant, the money ends. And so it's split into what we know as Conifer, which is from Rhizome, and the Webrecorder project, which is us. And our team is very small at the moment. It's just 3 of us, which is I am Lorena Ramírez-López, my colleagues, Ilya and Emma. I'll let Ilya introduce himself.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ilya. I'm the lead developer and creator of the Webrecorder project. And I think Emma might be sick today, unfortunately.
They're here in spirit. They do a lot, which we want to mention that in case you haven't gone to our new website, we have a new look. And we're very excited. I see Thomas is here. Thomas, thank you. He's the UX UI designer that helped us with our new look. So here's a link. We're still editing, but we're very excited. We hope that it'll let users be able to interact more with the website and get used to it. And yeah, we hope to hear, please reach out for any feedback and comments. We're open to all of that. And so to get the ball rolling, we're going to continue with some of the great news that I'll let Ilya explain to all of us.
Yeah, so our big news this month is that we just recently received an open source development grant from the Filecoin Foundation. Basically, the focus of this grant is actually sort of three strands of work. It's sort of an ambitious project in some ways. So one will be standardizing the WACZ format, which I'll talk about in more detail in a minute. So basically the idea is to get the specification more formally defined and have kind of a format that is essentially kind of like a formal specification that perhaps could be submitted to a standards body eventually, or just be up for reference online. So we'll figure that out. Yeah, part of that will be kind of standardizing some of these other things that are part of, there's the work format, but work alone is not enough for web archives to actually be useful. There's also other formats like the CDX index, a list of pages, a way to authenticate a web archive, potentially additional metadata. That part of this grant will be focusing on standardization. And then another equally important aspect is going to be UX research and design around sort of threat modeling for browser-based web archive creation. And I'll talk about that as well. And then the final strand will be of essentially implementation and updating our existing libraries, integrating the archive web page extension into the Aggregore browser, which is a browser specifically designed for that already supports peer-to-peer protocols. And so the idea will be to integrate the rest of the work into our existing tools and into this new the proof of concept browser. And this will be a 6-month grant. And so we'll be starting officially November 1st. And so a little bit more about the WACZ format, which is a key part of this. And so what WACZ is essentially is, and this is kind of a refresher as well for those who have attended our previous community calls, you've probably seen this before, but basically the idea is very simple. It's a zip file that packages together work files as well as CDX indices, a page list / seed list for if it came from a crawl, as well as extracted text, and also has a JSON manifest with fixity data. It could also have descriptive metadata, and in the future it can have crawl metadata. So out of all of these things in that list, the only thing that is really kind of standardized is the work format. But all these other things on the list are also fairly important for making web archives actually useful. And so our goal essentially will be to try to kind of more formally define what these other things are in terms of what the format is for having them in the file, and kind of what's in scope and what's out of scope. Yeah, so that's essentially the idea. And then kind of why create a new format? Part of it is that it's sort of an open data approach to web archives, is that the entire web archive is itself open data. It's we actually we currently extend an existing format called the frictionless data package standard, which so that gives us the JSON manifest with fixity data or a part of it. So that provides a little bit of existing spec for that. We'll be defining the rest of the data that is in the format. And it's also a way to share a discrete web archive kind of with batteries included in a way. And the idea is that you can just have this file that you can give to people the way that you can give them a video or PDF or docx, and then it can be immediately useful. It can be opened in the browser directly, can be put into a repository system and be made useful that way. And part of what makes that possible is that kind of the technical part of it is that it provides for fast random access even to large web archives. So there could be a WACZ file that's many gigabytes, and it should be possible to load it quickly or load the key parts of it quickly, such as the page list and perhaps let's say the text index, and do a search on the URLs or the pages in the WACZ file on demand, and then download everything else as necessary, which is sort of different from how, if you just have a work, for example, you have to download the entire work. And so, yeah, so we'll be working in this GitHub repo, and we'll have Ed Summers, who's a friend and colleague, who'll be helping us out with the specification. And yeah, the goal is kind of to turn it into a formal spec. Okay, yeah, and so another equally important part of this will be UX research, and that will be done in collaboration with New Design Congress, which is a research group based in Berlin. I don't know if anyone from NDC is here in the call. They are led by Kate Diem, who's a designer and researcher. And actually, they just released a report recently, which is really great. Basically focuses on sort of the limits of data of digital consent on data collection, which is a really great report. And yeah, so they'll be heading up the research part of this. And one of the key questions that we'll try to answer is, so we know all the benefits of web archiving, obviously, but what are the risks and threats? And so if browsers had web archiving built in, what are the kind of the downsides in a way, or what are the things that we should be concerned about if, let's say, your browser could create web archives as you browse and give it to you afterwards? Do you trust the browser? What should be done for that to be safe for users? Oh, and it's like I think Kate just joined the call, so we're just talking about the UX research work. Yeah, so yeah, this will be a really important part of this grant, is doing threat modeling and research around this a very important question. Kate, I don't know, I know you just joined, not to put you on the spot, but if you want to add anything about the UX research, I could turn over to you. If not, no worries. I was going to include a link to NDC's latest report, which I just read yesterday, and it was really great report. And I'll share that here as well. I think this is really relevant to, or will be relevant to our work as well, even though this is about consent and kind of major platforms that are out there. But I think this really applies to us as well.
Testing.
Hi, yeah, we can hear you.
And this is a really important conversation that as web archivists we should be having. So if anyone has thoughts, comments, we have the forum. This is also the space to further discuss. And there's no right or right answers because the research hasn't fully been done.
Yeah, so if you'd like, I can share a couple of thoughts on this.
Sure, go ahead.
Sorry,
yeah.
thank you for the space. So thank you. Yes, it's great to be working together. As Ilya mentioned, we put together we just published a report from some research we did last year into the limits of digital consent, really looking at critically evaluating the the outcomes of the past 5 years of trying to push for ethical digital consent inside complex systems. And this is a larger, like it's one part of a larger body of work that we've been producing over the past year and a half, 2 years now, really, looking into both the movements that have come up in response to some of the political or social issues of technology and infrastructure over the past decade in particular, both in a context of identifying what works and also critically evaluating ideas that seem to have promise to see whether or not they are actually, whether or not they actually live up to the promises that these solutions sort of offer. And in some cases they succeed and we back them. And in other cases, we're very critical of them. In the case of Webrecorder, I think what's interesting about this is that we really have two goals as part of this research. And I think, just to be super upfront, I'm really excited on behalf of the team at New Design Congress, because I think that there's a potential for a longer collaboration depending on how, everything goes with this one. But I think there's questions both around, New Design Congress is really looking at a number of things, and in the interest of time, I won't go through all of them, but two that are very relevant here. One is the nature of I prefer to use these terms of like self-determination and digital safety rather than using terms like ethics in technologies, because I think that ethics is a little bit less, it's a little bit more difficult to quantify than these topics of things like of digital safety or harmful outcomes and the potential for harm. So we frame a lot of the work that we do from that perspective from drawing from digital security and then applying it to political and social contexts. But we also are interested in designing new systems and new paradigms for comprehension. And we have this idea of like, what do the first principles of resetting interfaces for software where we consider comprehension, the ability to actually break through the overwhelming world. What if we start designing for like comprehension as a human right, alongside the ability for like safe operation of software as a human right and infrastructure. And so, like this is an example of that. It's really cool to be able to start to apply some of the existing learnings that we've had over the past 2 years, but also extend them further within the context of archiving at a level where we're sort of looking at it at the format level, rather than just being asked to come in 6 months, a year, 2 years from now to try to patch things over. The idea that this is a part of the format and beyond is a really powerful and very rarely seen forward-thinking thing, I think, from the perspective of Webrecorder. So I think, there's a lot of research to be done across both the format and also the format itself and the surrounding questions that we're trying to answer. And I think, I don't know, not to hype our collaboration up too much, but I think that there's an opportunity here to push the expectations on how we should be designing things from the ground up in, again, looking at formats at the very start and looking at them not just from what's technically possible and technically desirable, but also how can we maximize the values that the team holds in a social or political sense. And so, the next 6 months look like they're going to be very interesting. We'll be maintaining a very open research system for this as well. So, newdesigncongress.org is the site if you'd like to drop by. Let me have a look at the chat. I think it was Ilya. Ilya posted the report. Someone else mentioned, I'm sorry, I don't know who mentioned the earlier, the This Is Fine critique of decentralized technologies, because I was distracted by making my mic work. But yes, we've had a number of texts and essays and research reports that we put out in the last 2 years. So I encourage you, if this is of interest at all, to go through and take a look at some of the work that we'll be drawing from in this collaboration. Thank you.
Thanks, Kate. Thanks so much for this. For this broader overview. And so the idea is that so this UX research I also should make clear is that will hopefully kind of, even though there's sort of parallel strands, will affect kind of what we, as I was talking about the WACZ format, that will help us guide, for example, what to so like all these things that are supposed to be in the WACZ format will also have a chance to kind of examine and evaluate how essentially what to do with and reflect in a way what should be included and what shouldn't be included, or how it should be included in the WACZ in light of the UX research. So for example, maybe we'll conclude that certain types of metadata is appropriate to include, or a certain metadata shouldn't be included, or that we need encryption on some of this, or again, we'll try to figure out how how to improve this format based on the UX research in the middle of our grant, that we have a specific point in time where we will kind of essentially sync up and have an opportunity to update the specification in light of the research. So it's all really exciting and really important work. I'll just say basically I'm really excited about this collaboration. I think that, to my knowledge, I don't know that there has been this type of research done on web archiving at all, in terms of essentially focusing on user privacy and threat modeling and consent and all of that from the perspective in context of web archiving specifically. So I think this will be hopefully groundbreaking work, also to kind of maybe so
also hyping it up. Absolutely.
So we're all very excited about this collaboration. Other things for this call, I think the last thing we wanted to show was a new kind of switching gears a bit. Show this real quick and then move on to questions. Is basically we have this new glitch web archive starter that we created for the last few weeks. I think just in time for an iPres workshop, that basically allows for kind of an even simpler way to upload web archives to and share them. And again, assuming that you're comfortable with sharing a web archive, this is a way to do that. And I guess I could do a quick demo now, and then we can.
What's great about this is, I think we've all had that moment where we have all these work files, and then obviously
or WACZ files,
or WACZ files, and you double click on it and your computer is like, I don't know what this is. You're making up this format, and we just don't know where to really share them. So Ilya was really amazing where it got created this, where a platform where you can upload the WACZ or work format and it'll get recognized, and the web archive is essentially shared with other people on the internet that you would want to share with. So what do we do with it? So what is glitch, and how do we share archives?
So glitch is I don't have what's a good definition of glitch. I guess it's a kind of like a code sharing platform in a way, so that you can create basically web applications, and then it's all hosted on Glitch, and then others can fork them directly on Glitch and have their own copy and edit it. And it's sort of I guess in some ways it's a little bit like GitHub, but it's actually running the code rather than just storing it. So it is using so you could actually copy a working project, and you can run a whole web server on it, and there's a whole community around Glitch. I don't know if there's more to say about it. I've only, my experience with Glitch is fairly limited, I think, to kind of these small projects. But so this is the web archive at starter. So what I can do is I can remix this project, which makes a new copy of it. And so hopefully, and then it gives it some random name, and I can then rename it. So let's say I call it that, and then it automatically renames it. And then, so I actually had an earlier version of this where it required a little bit more work, but in this demo, we basically, what you can do is, so it has an assets folder here, and so but by default, so it shows you like this is the actual page, and this is the editor, and so I can upload an asset here, I can click on downloads, and I can then, so it doesn't actually recognize WACZ files by default, but I can, so for example, I have to select that, and then basically I upload a WACZ file to it, and it should automatically, let's see, and then I think I need to refresh. Yeah, and then basically this WACZ file is now, so this is appears in the page, and so this link, and I can actually, so yeah, for example, I can then share this link with all of you, and you can immediately load this web archive, and I can actually upload more files this way as well. So let's, so I don't know, I think, yeah, so it doesn't recognize WACZ format, so I have to select all files here. So I think this is me testing a COVID dashboard archive, and so yeah, I think that this should basically kind of allow you to share these with archives without having to write any code, without having to yeah, basically as kind of as simple as possible. So now I've uploaded 2 WACZ files, and they both should appear in this list. Maybe this was, should have checked that this actually worked. So let me just try reloading it again. So this was a testing. So that, yeah, so this one is just a Twitter archive. This one I think was
ArcGIS.
cool. Yeah, this is me testing ArcGIS, which is actually quite doesn't always work. So I think I was specifically testing, but let's see if it actually loads here. Maybe not. Okay, well, now that this may also be using an older version of the replay web page viewer, which actually I will update to the latest version. And the way that this works is just kind of a quick reminder of what it's actually doing is basically just using the oops, maybe I'll show it on here. Actually, no, that isn't going to work. Oh, okay, yeah. So basically, for each web archive, it creates I don't know if you could see this. It creates the replay web page tag. So this is our custom viewer for web archives. And that's sort of the part of this is that we have replay web pages, both a standalone site, and also it's something that you can embed in other websites, and then you could just put the replay web page tag pointed to a WACZ file or a work file, and then it will essentially render the web archive in the page in this way. And so the idea here is just to make it as easy as possible to embed web archives anywhere. So this happens entirely in the browser, and we're essentially hoping to support as many systems as possible for being able to load the web archive directly. So as part of that grant, of course, we'll be also supporting IPFS. It already works in a lot of ways, but we also have integration with the Archipelago repository system currently, and really any digital repository that supports loading videos or any other kind of media can also support web archives in this way. And so this glitch, so if you're looking for a way to quickly upload a WACZ file and share it with others, and kind of just use a platform that, and then, for example, you want to take it down, you can then, so I could go and delete this, for example, if I no longer want to share that. And I think it'll just take a second for it to reload. So this is one way to do that. And now I'll make sure that this is using the latest version of the viewer. Yeah, and so I think at this point, let's move on to questions because we covered a lot of things, the grant and this demo. So can open it up to questions.
We have one regarding the WACZ format, which is, do you have a sense of how far WACZ indexing for access would scale up? What size of WACZ file or how many WACZ files? With large-scale web archives, for example, the UK Web Archive, we built separate indexes outside of work files as the collection is so large.
Yeah, so that's a good question. Yeah, so I think that for kind of national library scale web archiving, probably where this would make sense is for example, extraction. Like, for example, if you wanted to what would make sense, for example, if you, let's say, for example, you wanted to give researchers a certain subset of your collection and provide them with not just the work files, but something that they could use. So this could be a way to do that, where you could put the work files as well as the necessary CDX and metadata and page just in a standard format, and sort of essentially make that available for download. In general, we are looking at ways, and that will be part of the spec, is how to essentially scale this up to larger collections. So we're starting with kind of browser-based, but then what happens if you have repeated crawls and probably creating multiple WACZ files for each crawl, for example. Yeah, we will be looking at that. For existing collections, of course, that might not be practical at kind of at the petabyte scale, for example, but it could still be a useful format for making things available as essentially a portable way to give someone a chunk of a web archive, for lack of a better word, from that's extracted from a much larger collection. So yeah, hopefully that answers the question a little bit.
Yeah. Sorry, this is Nicola. Thanks. That's what I was thinking, and it might be something that would be useful for us, because alongside the bulk scale archiving, which is quite resource intensive, and there's a time consideration, because if a curator has built a thematic web archive collection, they have to wait until all of that content is accessed. And we also have separate indexes as well, which control permission for whether it's accessible on a library premises or openly accessible and all that kind of thing. But what you were just describing, so that small subset of content, we could give that to a researcher or a curator, and they could have more of a sense of ownership of their collection and curate it and manage it that way. So it might be something that we could do to cleave the collection building from the whole scale domain archiving. Thank you.
Right. Yep, absolutely. Yeah. And just a little bit of background. Yeah, for those that yeah, so Nicola is from the UK Web Archive, where you're basically crawling everything in the .uk domain, which is a very large, obviously a much larger scale effort than, for example, a smaller thematic collection. And so, but yeah, this kind of provides a flexibility to also create the smaller collections from the much larger archive.
Thank you. Yeah, sorry, just one final point, and then I'll shut up. But also coming back to the work that you've been doing with the New Design Congress and what Cade was talking about as well. By doing that, so empowering researchers or people in the communities to archive their own collections in this way, it kind of gives people a bit more of a handle on what they are including and are not including. So all of these ethical considerations about whose voices we want to include, or perhaps content that we want to exclude as well, it puts it in the hands of the people that are closer to the communities and not necessarily in the National Library, which is an arm's length organisation away from those communities. That's just what we're thinking. So thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah.
I have a question on do we know which organizations are starting to adopt WACZ?
Yeah, so I think that I know that, I guess Peter Chan is here. So I know that Peter has been adding WACZ files to the Stanford Digital Repository. I think last month, I think there was a whole a blog post that he wrote about that. Essentially, it makes it possible to integrate web archives into existing repository without having to have any additional infrastructure. And I think that there's probably other institutions that are also using WACZ files as part of their repositories already. Don't have a comprehensive list, and the format is still fairly new, and so that's why we're hoping that as part of this grant, we'll have a more formal definition that will make it possible to will make it easier for institutions to adopt this format by kind of more rigorously defining everything that goes into it. And that will also enable for there to be other viewers as well. If someone wants to create a separate viewer than the one that we have, that should be possible in the future as well. Yeah, so I think a number of institutions have probably experimented with the format. Yeah, and then hopefully we'll have more in the future.
Yeah, and that's part of what the grant is about. We're working with implementation. So hopefully with, this grant, the implementation will make it easier for more organizations to adopt it. And also WACZ it's open. So a lot of people can use it and they don't need to tell us they're using it. So.
Right, but definitely want to hear. Oh, great, and thanks for letting us know that you're using it as well at the Smithsonian. Yeah, so I'd be curious to know what type of, yeah, but we're definitely always excited to hear about use cases, anything that's interesting or not, or anything that doesn't work. Also, good to know so that we can work on making it better in the future.
I would like to share, Ilya, I'm going to put you on the spot again. We were doing a demo the other day and Ilya showed, it's like, oh yeah, you can work with Flash. And the example that you used, Ilya, was so cool. I was wondering if you can maybe share with us how that works, kind of go through. I think it was using the MoMA Russian exhibit that had the required Flash.
Oh, sure. Yes. Yeah, I think that was in our iPress workshop. Someone asked about Flash, and so yeah, that was so. As many of you know, Flash is no longer works in modern browsers as of 2021. Even though it was working fairly well, I think the Flash player did work, but then they basically made it impossible for it to continue being used, and so now we have to rely on emulators, and so we use the Ruffle emulator. Yeah, I can probably show that. And actually, that example that I showed came from Sumitra Punkin, who's also on this call from the NIARC. Yeah, and so that was one of the examples that they had, I think. Yeah, I can share my screen. Yeah, so for example, if you load a Flash page like now, you'll probably see something like this with our archive web page extension, which I didn't talk about this call, but I think we've showed it in our previous calls. What it does is it automatically enables the Flash emulator. So if I start recording this page, it will reload, and then we'll see this comes from Ruffle, and I can click on it, and the Flash piece starts working essentially. And so, all the hard work is done by Ruffle. We're just, but what the extension allows is that since Archive Web Page is a browser extension, and we already have access to everything on the page, we can actually kind of enhance the page. So it's not just archiving, it's actually, in a way, enhancing the page by adding the Flash emulator to the system. And yeah, and so it's possible to capture Flash content in this way. Now, it won't be all Flash content, since Flash is definitely a complex product that has existed for what, I guess, 25 years or so. And so this works well for older Flash pieces. For some of the newer ones, it may not work as well. But I think the Ruffle emulator project is continuously improving. So as they add additional features, we'll be able to incorporate it into the latest extension by using their latest releases. So hopefully they'll improve over time, but it doesn't work for everything. Yeah, then I can browse this as well. Then yeah, this should also work in replay web page as well. But let's see if there are any. Yeah, I'll stop sharing this, and maybe we could take a few more questions.
We have we have had a forum discussion be brought up, which I'm quite enjoying. It had been about the autopilot. Anissa has shared the link, so it's a forum discussion that has been happening. And let's see, pull up the WACZ capture. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Thanks for the. And sorry, I have not yet had a chance to look at that file, Jack. Thank you very much for reminding me. Yeah. So it's a tricky issue with autopilot. Is that and maybe I can maybe it's worth I can show that if but yeah, basically once you start running autopilot on an Instagram page, it'll keep going. At some point we've had reports that it stops working, and I'm trying to figure out why that happens. And I think my thought is that it's probably some sort of rate limiting on Instagram's part, but I haven't been able to pinpoint it yet. And it's very tricky to debug because it happens about 2 or 3 hours in into archiving a large feed. And so I was going to see if I could figure out basically the cause of that, but I haven't.
It reminds me of, like, you know, when you're watching Netflix and you're just watching for a really long time, and then Netflix asks you, "Are you still there?" It's like, "Yes, I'm here. I'm still watching. Let me do my thing, Netflix, please."
Yeah, I wonder if so it could be some sort of rate limiting that maybe and yeah, we just need to test it a bit more. And it's very tricky because that's the only way to archive some of these social media pages, is to start from the top and then go all the way back to the end of the feed. And so you can't really start in the middle, unfortunately. Yeah, so I don't know if it has anyone else run into issues with Instagram in particular, or has successfully captured really large feeds.
For anyone planning on to and they want to prep, because it seems both Anissa and Jack are great colleagues to ask as well. If anyone on the chat has been planning on doing a large scale capture on Instagram and you just don't know where to start, like, that's always the question: where to start, how to prep, how to organize. There's a lot of troubleshooting involved.
So, Anissa, you've been you mentioned that you've manually captured 2,400 posts. That is was that without using autopilot?
No, just working on something else.
Okay.
That's so massive. It makes me think I could do makes me think I could do 2,400, but I think the largest Instagram collection I've captured has been around 600 posts when working manually.
Okay.
And I would suggest scrolling all the way down to the base of the page, i.e. to the earliest post, and expanding the very first post in the feed, and then tabbing through in reverse chronological order right to the top. And in those cases, I've worked in a separate capture session to collect Instagram stories. But working manually in that way, although it is labor intensive, that has been, I've had the best results in terms of being able to capture all the various enriched details, so comments, embedded tags on top posts, and indeed to ensure that I'm capturing any video content in posts, and stacks of images also. Yeah, but I haven't worked on it recently, so that was one of the reasons why I wanted to hear about Jack's experience. So I haven't worked specifically on Instagram since the tool suite has been updated.
And so you were doing that without the without autopilot, so you scrolled all the way to the bottom of Instagram feed and then went back one. No, that's interesting. I haven't tried that. I mean, that's also something that we could potentially automate, although yeah, I mean, it's sort of tricky to do, because what is the end? Yes, and so the current automation behavior, and we just have one, mostly because that was, and we could potentially add new ones even, but yeah, it basically just goes through each post and waits for a certain amount of time, and yeah. So if there are any suggestions for how to improve that, yeah, perhaps we can add an additional behavior or add an stories are also something that's possible to automate, but I think it was just yeah, the way we probably need a way for users to be able to choose what behavior they like to run on a page, which we don't quite yet have the support for. But yeah, that might be something to add in the future. Yeah, and as Peter mentions, yeah, a lot of these things are very kind of really hard to reproduce. Sometimes an issue might happen at one time and then not at another time. Also, depending on these how these platforms are. Obviously, Facebook and Instagram had a huge outage a couple of weeks ago, so we don't. Yeah, who knows what's happening on their end too? That's always possible that the issue is not on our end, but on the end of the platform if something isn't working. But yeah, if there's anything that any ways that we can make this easier, let us know. It's definitely like a huge area, just trying to keep up with these platforms. And if you think about how many people are working on developing those platforms and how many people are working on archiving them, it becomes kind of in a way, it's sort of surprising that we can even do what we can do now. But yeah, and I will review that forum post and get back to that. And Oh, yes, yes, thank you for sharing that. Yeah, so outside of these calls, we do have a forum, which we try to, keep updated with kind of the latest info, and it's specifically open so that anyone can post there and use it as a resource, and hopefully we'll be able to kind of build a body of knowledge around this.
Yeah, like you mentioned and what Peter has mentioned in the chat, a lot of this is one-off. Like in some case, he mentioned, I run into issues in several Facebook among like 300 captures. And then in some cases, the issue disappears when I use a different computer or a different time.
Right, yeah. As I was saying, that, yeah, it can be very, very tricky to reproduce these issues consistently, fortunately. In some ways, Instagram in some ways is a lot easier than Facebook. We just have to figure out this rate limiting issue, or maybe it just needs to go even slower. Facebook, on the other hand, is kind of a mess, really, in terms of the platform is just really hard to archive in a consistent way, and always has been, especially as you get further down into the first couple of posts or in a feed generally work fairly well, and we had to do custom things for videos as well and for photos, but then as you start scrolling down, the way that their API works, it becomes kind of less and less likely to work in a way, sort of the further that you scroll down. And yeah, so I don't have any good solutions right now, but definitely kind of exploring ways to make the replay better. And generally it does capture things, it's just replaying them on the page is the hard part. So, but at least for videos, I found that if you go to the videos page, it should be able to capture all the videos, even if they don't play back in the page, they should still be in the archive. And using replay web page, at least you could search by video, for example, and find them that way. But yeah, so yeah, it continues to remain a challenge.
Yeah, and then we have new challenges. I'm a big TikTok fan. I don't know if anyone else on the call has been using TikTok or archiving TikTok. There's plenty of different social media platforms aside from Facebook and Instagram and Twitter that, you know, communities use. So if there's a social media platform that you've come across, let us know.
You just made me think of one question which I had that was prompted by something I read in the documentation about kind of anchoring your collection so that it is replayed in a specific release where you know the replay works. And I'm just wondering whether for those of us who are working on collecting these very frequently changing platforms, whether we would be well advised to indeed anchor our replays to a specific version of replay web.
Yeah, so that's a good point. Yeah, so not only did the sites change, but of course our tools change as well. And so yes, it is possible to in the and I can actually go to the yeah, so with replay web page, it's possible to it's fairly easy to use a specific version of the replay web page release, and so yeah, I would recommend using a specific version, just so that it remains consistent. And the way to do that is to, I'll just share my screen real quick. Yeah, so if you are using a replay web page, you can specify the specific version from, so it's basically hosted on on a CDN that's tied to a particular release here. And so, yes, and then as we hopefully as we release a new version, it'll make things better, not worse. But if you want to be absolutely sure that if you are using Replay Web Page, we recommend embedding a specific version like this, rather than if you don't include the version, it'll use the latest. But if you include it like this, then it will use the latest, and actually in both places. So yeah, we do recommend doing that.
Thanks for bringing that up, Anissa.
All right, we have about 1 minute left. Any final questions or comments?
And feel free to reach out to us via the forum, email, Twitter.
Yep. Yeah, and check out the new website as well, which we covered very briefly. And thanks again to Thomas for the design. But we do also have the new community page, which is where we'll post the video of this call as well as announce the next call. Yeah, and let us know if you have any feedback on the site or anything that you think should be included that isn't there right now, or you'd like more info on, for example. Yeah, definitely let us know.
All right, well, thank you again for your time, and I'll be sharing the video with everyone later.
Yeah, thanks everyone.